Do you have a problem with Draymond's comments?
Oh, rookie,
yeah, I
Stephen.
do. Well, yeah, I do. But it's only because I think he lacks a certain understanding and he's not willing to admit certain things. I didn't personalize it because I think to some degree he's absolutely right. You do have folks out there chasing headlines or whatever. But what form of media does not? Has he watched what goes on in the nation's capital? And by the way, it wasn't just when Donald Trump arrived. It's always been the case. When we look at the news and what we see on television, what we read in the newspapers, et cetera, it's always happened. You have athletes themselves. That's exactly what they try to do. I mean, this is a guy that has his own podcast or whatever. Every time he says something, it makes headlines. Why do you think he does it? Because he wants to make headlines. So let's acknowledge that first and foremost. Secondly, and more importantly, here's what I think it really needs to be recognized about Draymond and all the professional athletes today. They are absolutely right when they say sometimes things get a bit excessive and things get blown out of proportion, and I applaud their frustration. I don't blame them one bit. But it amazes me how they don't accept culpability for the role that they play in it. They don't sit up there and say, this person in the media. They generalize. They act like everybody in the media are enemies. And there's plenty of people in the media that are incredibly supportive of them, who they are, what they are, not just as athletes, but as men, how charitable and philanthropic they are, what their generosity entails, and all of that other stuff in between. They don't want to put in the work to cultivate relationships so they can try to dictate narratives. What they try to do is do it themselves, not realizing on many, many occasions they come across, Max, as incredibly disingenuous. Because what happens is that if you've got media relations department, a publicist, PR folks, managers, and you're insulated by all of those plus hanger-ons and beyond, you're getting on folks for trying to get as close to the truth as possible. And I don't mind you being an athlete that believes your personal life is none of your business. They've taken it a step further. They feel that way when you ask them about basketball. So they play basketball for millions, in front of millions, every day in a public platform that enables them to get paid what they get paid. Then they turn around and they take offense to basketball or football questions that you actually ask them, and you veer away and stay away from their personal business. They've actually gotten to a point where they're upset about anything that you ask them that they don't like, even if it's directly associated with their profession. At some point in time, we've got to call them on that and tell them, put on their big boy pants and grow up and stop whining about what reality is, because you're a part of it. You knew you were becoming a part of it, and you wanted to for the money. This is what comes with it. Suck it up and deal with it.
You're right about that point. That's not what Draymond said in this case, though. I agree with that sentiment generally, using this as a jumping off point.
Yeah, I was saying it generally.
To discuss that. But what Draymond did here, well, first I want to address something. It has always been that way, that the media will parse what you say, and the media will select the most sensational moments and bites of what you say and package that and market that and try to profit from that. It's grist for the mill. But that has been ratcheted up with social media. We are in a clickbait culture, and what we do, Draymond is absolutely right. We put microphones in front of these people. It is mandatory that they talk to the microphones. That's part of their contract with the NBA, really. They have to talk to the press. We ask them pointed questions. The point of those questions is to get them talking so they will say something that we can sensationalize. Sometimes out of context, it will be chopped up to get the most sensational soundbite, and it will be used as clickbait. But that's why we admire athletes like Draymond Green out of proportion to other athletes oftentimes, because in spite of the context in which he's playing and living and operating and existing in his professional life, in spite of what I just mentioned, he'll give you the straight dope anyway. See, it's easy to give the straight dope when it doesn't come at any personal risk. But knowing that every little thing you say is going to be chopped up and sometimes repurposed out of context so that people can make it seem like you meant something that you in fact didn't. That makes it harder to tell the truth. And Draymond is a guy who gives you his truth in spite of that personal risk or personal cost. Stephen A., it's the reason that this show is not for everybody. I mean, in terms of appearing on this show, because this show comes with some personal risk, some personal cost. We know that we don't run from subjects. We deal with them head on. And we understand that when we're telling the truth about them, or at least the truth as we see it, there will be little phrases and moments that can be chopped up and repurposed out of context and used as clickbait. And yet we do it anyway. And that's one of the reasons for the success of the show. And that's one of the reasons I admire Draymond Green, not because he's wrong about this, but precisely because he's right, and he still does him anyway.